Hey ladies, this is Mocha Mommy here bringing you another video. And in this video, I want to talk about some global economic issues related to my work experience, travels, professional career for both me and my spouse, and how it relates to the issue of the passport bros. I'm going to put this issue to bed for once and for all. I didn't think I had to address it, but constant comments and emails make me realize that ladies, I do have to discuss this issue with you, and I'm going to tell you why it is none of your concern. So I'm just going to go over my life experience and global experience with travel and explain to you why this issue should be put to bed once and for all. First, I'll start with my husband's experience being on the Puerto Rican national team in like the early to mid 90s. He was still pretty much a teenager when he began to travel internationally with the Puerto Rican national team, playing in everything from the Latin American series to the World Baseball Series, the Caribbean Baseball Series. And lots of times teams have a clergy member that travels with them. Of course, he's young. He's away from home for the first time. Well, not the first time, but he's away from home, traveling internationally. So he kind of stuck close to the clergy member, of the team, right? The clergyman of the team, the chaplain. And one of the things that the chaplain would always do is make a lot of conversations with the drivers, the servers, the hotel staff, just to learn little colloquialisms and to learn a little bit about the mannerisms and the dialect of the native people. Why? Because a lot of those international athletes, even though they're a somewhat protected class, many times they could often be victim of being pickpocketed or having some of their items stolen. And it just was a way to protect yourself. And even throughout our travels throughout Latin America and the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, my husband still does that for safety. Now, typically athletes are kind of a protected class. Sports gambling is pretty big and organized crime is usually involved. So it's in that athlete's best interest to make sure that they stay in certain areas, to make sure that they are aware of the customs of that culture, and be very careful where they party and who they party with, because you can end up on the wrong side of the law very easily, especially with some of the women, especially with some of the local eateries and nightclubs. So it's important to be well-versed in the culture and kind of knowing the boundaries. Do you think passport bros really know that? Do you think passport bros are part of that protected class, or are they just looking for the cheapest apartments and Airbnbs? Do you think that they're protecting themselves from how pervasive organized crime is in those areas, even when it comes to getting things like cell phones, Wi-Fi, where to eat, and where to stay? Organized crime has infiltrated almost every single aspect of the Latin American society. Also, another thing that we see a lot with these passport bros, well, all these single moms, all these single moms, all these single moms. Do you realize that illegitimate children, even though these are Catholic countries, that's 50% of the births in Latin America. In Colombia, 84% of the children who are born out of wedlock. That's higher than the numbers here in the United States. I will put the articles down in the description box and in the comments because I leave receipts when I give facts. So let's talk about Colombia. My experience with Colombia is pretty limited. I went there for a couple of days in 2011. My husband was working for a plucky startup that had like an international division. This is before it was taken over by the Microsoft subsidiary that he works for now. They wanted him to do some international travel for setting up like Wi-Fi internationally. And because he was a native speaker, he was a shoo-in. They paid for a lot of our travel and we had some pretty good times. So around 2011, we're in Cartagena, Colombia. The capital is Bogota. Cartagena is kind of like a touristy beach town. Very beautiful, kind people. It was a good stay. But we were walking down the street and somebody stops my spouse. Calls him by his first name. He doesn't keep walking. He has a pretty common Hispanic name. They called him by his complete name. Blank, 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 blank. Okay? They called all four of the names. They called him by all four of them. He stops and he turns around. And he was like, hey, I know you're here setting up the Wi-Fi. They don't say Wi-Fi over there. It's Wi-Fi, right? Wi-Fi, because that's how it's phonetically how they would say it in Spanish. And he's like, yeah, if you ever need anything, give me a call, blah, 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 blah. My husband's like, okay, thank you very much. He says, we're going back to the hotel now, and we're packing and we're leaving now. We packed and we left. What's going on? My husband is like, let me tell you something. That's cartel. I don't know that man. He is not any of my contacts. I don't know how he knows my complete name, but I know that he does know it. We're getting on the plane now. We left that night. Now, a couple months later, we saw the Hotel Intercontinental and the Secret Service kind of got in some kind of brouhaha over something with sex workers coming over to like the legitimate side. There's one part of Colombia that is cartel controlled, okay? They control the restaurants, they control the hotels, they control the eateries, they control the nightclubs, they control everything in that section. But then there's legitimate business. You cannot mix the two, because if you mix the two, the United States will not help you. Barack Obama did not help his own Secret Service agents who were there to do business, okay? And to make sure that he was secure while he would come down there and do business. He didn't protect those Secret Service members. Why? Because the reach of the cartel is so wide and so deep and so embedded in the infrastructure that it's just something you don't want to mess with. Even to the point where the United States government and the State Department and the President of the United States himself did not cape for these men in 2012 when this controversy broke off of some prostitutes in their 20s. That's how deep cartel violence goes in Colombia. Ladies, if you decide to visit this beautiful country, stay on the legitimate side. Listen to the locals, okay? Listen to the expats who will tell you where to go. And usually they're the wealthier ones. They're not the passport bros. Watch what you're doing, because guess what? If anything happens to you, if you end up missing, if you end up hurt and you're on the wrong side, the United States is not going to come and get you. I'm letting you know that right now. If they're not even caping for their own Secret Service, they damn sure ain't going to do nothing for you if you end up on the wrong side of the tracks dealing with the wrong people. So let's talk about Mexico. Of course, I've been to like Cabo and Cancun. My sister did some remote work from Tulum, which I didn't get a chance to visit, Acapulco, the touristy places in Mexico. But my biggest experience with Mexico probably had to be when I was stationed in El Paso at Fort Bliss. I'll be honest, I loved living in El Paso. It was a great place for when my kids were young. It was a great opportunity for investment, for us to buy property. I mean, I still think El Paso is probably one of my favorite places to be. You'll see some pictures here. I've included some pictures of the wall. But I thought that was very interesting how much the Black men would talk about how much better the Mexican women were. And it always seems as if, listen, I love women with confidence, okay? But let me tell you something. Those women with their 3X bodies in their 1X spandex, they were some of the most confident big women I've ever seen. I mean, because they knew that they could pull any Black dude on that post, no matter what rank, single or married. They knew good and well. I remember there was this one dude, he was trying to start to talk mess about Black women to my husband because he was in my husband's unit, and my husband shut it down immediately. So when we go to the company picnic, the woman he bought, child, she looked like the Dora Explorer parade float. You talking like the shorts with the crop top, the tummy hanging out. It was like, dang, swiping, no swiping. That woman looked like the Dora the Explorer parade float for real. But again, they have all that confidence because, their heads are blown up by the Black men who were there on that post. Also, too, when you cross into Juarez, that's one thing I ain't never messed with. I never really messed with Juarez too much. I never really messed with Tijuana too much, simply because even when people talk about how cheap the jewelry is, how cheap the medication is, how cheap this electronics are, I still never really messed with it too much because there were just too many horror stories. People getting cars stolen, people getting jewelry stolen, people getting jacked. And now, of course, I knew that there were some things that people were doing that were on the border of legal and illegal. A lot of people, you can buy weed over there, a lot of the soldiers would get in trouble, get robbed, get their dog tags taken, get their military ID, and be threatened by the cartel because, and I was like, well, the best thing you need to do is to start tipping your hoes. Like, tip them hoes. Like, we all know when we go to Mexico, right? They water down your drinks if you don't tip well. Like, your food is always served cold at the resort if you don't tip well. So, ladies, just tip well. And fellas, if you're going to go over there and mess with these hoes, please tip well because, trust me, they will tell the pimp or whoever they're dealing with to beat you up, to rob you. That's just how it goes. Tip your hoes, fellas. Tip your hoes. Before this video gets too long, I want to point out 2 other countries. Dominican Republic. So I know that a lot of these passport bros are kind of talking about DR. My youngest daughter's godfather is from the Dominican Republic. He met my husband while they were both serving together in the military, playing on the rec league, being part of the all-army baseball. He didn't make it, but my husband still served as an advisor. And it was very funny. I remember seeing them in the cafeteria, and they're sitting together talking, and I'm with this other runner who happens to be a Caucasian girl, and we walk up to them, and so we just kind of started a conversation. We're sitting in the DFAC with them, and we started a conversation. She's like, oh, so are you guys on the baseball team? And then my husband's like, what? You see a Dominican and a Puerto Rican sitting together, and you assume that we're baseball players? And she's like, oh, I'm sorry. And he's like, no, I'm just kidding. We're baseball players. And that was the beginning of their friendship. He is now that guy is now, he's baseball royalty where he's from, okay? Let me tell you how the Dominican Republic treats baseball royalty. Again, huge pervasive issues with organized crime, a beautiful country, fantastic people, but we can't deny what happened in 2019 to Hall of Famer David Ortiz. He was shot at point blank range in the back in a restaurant that he owns. He has made it his life's work to bring employment and to bring business to the people of Dominican Republic. He's done a lot to put a lot of those players in the spotlight and on a pedestal. And this is how basically they get repaid. Organized crime is very pervasive. I want you to think about it. The average Dominican makes about $400 American a month, okay? How are they getting 5G and all these fancy phones, right, to call and communicate with these guys online and through the phone and FaceTime, right? It's usually organized crime, ladies. So I'm just saying, listen, our good friend, he goes back to visit, but he would never go back to live. His businesses are in Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, and Florida. He doesn't go back because he understands what wealth happens, what happens to wealth over there. And David Ortiz violence, it happened to be solved by a Boston-based private investigator because the police over there didn't even bother to enforce the fact that one of their local celebrities was almost killed simply because organized crime pretty much runs the Dominican Republic and their law enforcement system. So this is what the passport bros are looking forward to. Another very beautiful country that has had an illustrious history, gorgeous infrastructure, would have to be Venezuela. Venezuela actually was one of the more developed countries on the South American continent until pervasive socialism and irresponsible government policies led to a collapse of their economy once the oil markets burst. Okay, oil became very cheap. Their dollar or their currency became next to nothing. There was widespread chaos, political and social turmoil. And what happened to those wealthy oil barons? Where did they go? They came to America, ladies. You will meet a lot of very wealthy oil executives in Houston that are from Venezuela. And what did they do with their children? What did they do with their wealth? They applied for visas. These are who are on your college campuses. All of the turmoil that's happening in South America right now as a result of the crashing of their currency, of one of their most stable economies, those are your visa recipients, people. Don't think that all these Hispanic immigrants are just these day workers trying to cross the border. Many of them have visas and they're flying here first class. And you ladies, instead of going to the World Cup, watching these players shine and hanging out with the illustrious elites of South America's ruling class, you're sitting here arguing dusties online about passports and their trips to third world countries. Again, I can talk about Asia because I talked about Asia in my videos when it came to do with the military. And I will link those in the description box below, and I will make sure I tag those videos above when I talk about my experience, because, sex work is legal in many parts of Asia. And again, I've never ever fought with any of these guys with their Filipino wives. Why? Because their Filipino wives end up going to nursing school and staffing my night shift. Come on. They're Filipino ex-wives. I can't even say ex-wives because they're Catholic. They don't get divorced. But that's how I staffed a lot of my shifts. When I was activated and I had to run these healthcare facilities that had civilian and military workforces, that's who staffed my night shift. A lot of these guys' ex-wives. And don't worry about their kids, because guess what? One of their boys will step in. Trust me, they always do. 9 times out of 10, it is. Listen, y'all, I'm closer to 50 than I am to 40. And I'm just letting you know this is the experience that I have. And this is why I don't address it, because if you sit back long enough, you see the mistakes they make. You see what happens. And I understood and traveled the world enough through business, the military, and personal travel to know how these things work. That's why I don't worry about it. And that's why women who know don't address it. Now, I do suggest you travel to parts of South America, Central America, and the Spanish-speaking Caribbean. But you have to travel in one of the 4 protected classes. And what are the 4 protected classes? 1, missionaries. 2, students and educators. 3, wealthy tourists. Or 4, athletic delegations. I highly suggest that if you ladies do travel to these parts of the world, and I suggest that you do, it's an amazing experience. Don't do it on the cheap. Your dollar goes very far in these countries. Please stick to the hotel brands that you know. Please stick to the areas that are designated for tourists and luxury travel and luxury shopping and eating experiences. You can definitely experience luxury for pennies on the dollar compared to America, but make sure you stay in those areas. This is not the time to get the Airbnb and find travel and transportation on the cheap. You want to be safe when you're traveling to this part of the world. And I want to encourage you, hey, if you want to go to Asia, definitely do it. I just remember being in Asia once as a single woman and again being married. And I can tell you, listen, I know that a lot of the soldiers there were like, y'all black women just gonna be sitting in the NCO club by yourself. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm not. I have titties and I know baseball. There's no way I'm going to be lonely in Japan. Okay? And again, I didn't know any Japanese. Only Japanese I knew was Ichiro Suzuki, right? The baseball player. That's it. That's all I needed to do. And all kinds of doors opened up for me. Second time I went, I was with a girlfriend. She's saying, hey, I'm so afraid and da-da-da-da. And, the black men are saying this, da-da-da. I'm like, girl, we have an ambassador. His name is Hideki Matsui. We're going to get the jerseys and we're going to party as soon as we get out here. And wouldn't you know, that opened a lot of doors for us. Listen, they don't have religion over there. They have baseball. And if you know that, that will get you into a lot of doors, which is why I had you watch the Ben Berlander documentary. It opens a lot of doors, ladies, and it opens doors here in America. So when the World Baseball Classic comes up in March of 2023, be out the house. Be out the house, ladies. Be out of the house. Stop having these dusty conversations about these dusty men who are going to these parts of the world that are cartel controls and they're not guaranteed to get back safely. Be out of the house. Who are the key players for the U.S. team in the World Baseball Classic? Mookie Betts, Cody Bellinger, Pete Alonso, Mike Trout, all players I have told you about. You can watch my videos and see that I've touted these men and been talking about them for years. They are prominent on the global stage. And next year, the next World Cup in 2026, guess where it's going to be? It's going to be on American soil. Ladies, this is an international event that brings wealth globally. You're going to want to be outside. We're not going to keep having these dusty conversations about what these dusty men are doing because it's not worth your time and it's not worth mine either. I wish you ladies the best and safe travels. This is Mocha Mommy, and I'll see you in the next video.